Howdy and welcome into Forte Catholic. I am Taylor Schroll, and today, for the first time ever in the history of this channel, we are doing a video on a topic that I really didn't want to do. Most of the time, these are things that I'm really excited about or really wanted to be excited about and then was disappointed. Morbius, I was never interested in, and then after all the backlash from people seeing it in theaters, I just didn't want to watch it. I didn't want anything to do with it. But then it got so bad, became a joke. I was like, look, I'm not going to give this any money, but I will watch it on streaming. So I waited until streaming, and I really hope you did too, or that you didn't watch it. So usually whenever we do videos in our Catholic Perspective series like this, it's on a Marvel and Star Wars, and we look at some of the great things that the show did, we look at some of the bad things the show did, and we explore the themes. We're going to do something similar today, but the movie was incredibly chaotic, so the first part of this video might be a little chaotic. We're just going to go through my notes that I was taking. It's some of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen in a big budget movie, but towards the end, we will talk about two primary themes that I actually really liked sitting with after watching this movie. So without further ado, here is our Morbius Catholic Perspective video. As I mentioned, I waited for streaming. I just was not going to go to the theater and waste my time. I mean, being a husband with kids, it's like I'm not going to waste a babysitter to go see this movie that I knew was going to be terrible. So we get to the beginning of the movie. It's even before like the title credits. I have two or three questions just from the opening scene. So this is where we meet Dr. Michael Morbius, who's a doctor. Didn't even know that was just the character's name. You know, we look at like other, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's like when Doctor Strange and Spider-Man meet. Spider-Man says, "Hi, I'm Peter," and Doctor Strange says, "I'm Doctor Strange." He goes, "Oh, we're using our made-up names. I'm Spider-Man." But for Doctor Strange, that's his made-up name and his superhero name. I didn't realize it was the same for Morbius because, I mean, who cares about Morbius? But I didn't realize that the whole movie is just the main character's last name. So he arrives at this very scary place that has all these bats. And he just straight up kills his ride home, which doesn't make sense. They then go to the title screen. They never address it again. So the guy who flew this like fancy plane to get him there said, "Hey, we need to go. This isn't safe." Dr. Michael Morbius is like, "I'm going in anyway." And then that guy dies. So how does Dr. Michael Morbius get away? No one knows. And he just starts off by straight up murdering essentially a chauffeur, a fancy chauffeur. But as we meet Dr. Michael Morbius, we get to know a little bit of his backstory about he and his friend Milo. They both have this disease where they're going to die and they're not going to live life. They're not going to live a good life. So like Dr. Michael Morbius is walking around on a cane. But he's a doctor and he's brilliant and he wants to find a cure for this. So he starts off with these good intentions to save himself, people like himself, his best friend Milo, and anybody else that has this disease. So it starts off with good intentions and then it goes somewhere else. We'll get to that theme when we get to our little theme section here in a couple minutes. But I'm just wanted to share you my chaotic notes. Tyrese is an actor in this movie. Don't know his character's name because he's not in it much. So we're just going to call him Tyrese. He must be a speedster in this universe. That's not what the movie says. The movie just says he's like a cop, just a normal guy. But there's this fight, and Morbius goes up to the top floor, and Tyrese was on the bottom floor. And then about 8 seconds later in the movie, he's on the top floor. So he must be a speedster because there was like 1,000 stairs that he had to run up. And he was there within 8 seconds. So there you go. Tyrese is now canon in the Sony and Marvel verse. He's now a speedster. So there's one point where the cops are looking for Morbius, essentially looking for this guy that killed a bunch of people because, he starts the movie off by killing a bunch of people on a boat and, killing the random driver for no reason. There's just a lot of people dying, and the cops just walk up to him and his face changes into like the scary vampire guy, and the cops don't flinch at all, which just made me wonder, like, I want a spin-off show of what their life is like. Like, what were they doing every day that a man turns into a vampire in their face and they don't back away, they don't scream, they just kind of look at him and they're like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, what's going on in their home life? What's going on their just like normal beat in police life? I need a spin-off show of this, please, Sony. So the theme thing that I wrote down, we'll get there in a second, but like making a choice with adverse consequences. What are the implications? We'll get to that in a second. The movie makes you kind of think that that Dr. Michael Morbius kills a nurse in order to get blood. That's all this plot that doesn't really matter because the plot sucks. This movie's terrible. They kind of make you think that he killed the nurse, but then we find out later that it was Milo. At some point, Michael's just on a bus with his girlfriend. It just doesn't make sense. None of this movie makes sense. I just kept asking. I was watching it with my wife on Netflix or however we watched it, and just sitting on the sofa. I was like, how is any of this happening? It was just a very bad movie. But, you know, at least we got the gift of Matt Smith, the actor who plays Milo, just randomly dancing for apparently no reason. He just dances a lot. I mean, he got healed. And he got superpowers, and he's like, man, I can dance. And we're going to watch this for a while because I think Sony, knowing this movie sucked, they knew they had Matt Smith, and Matt Smith is an incredible actor. So they're just like, what if he just danced for like 3 minutes? So we filmed that, and they're like, let's do it. And that's why Sony is losing. They suck. Okay. At the end, the final fight just didn't make any sense. In the final fight, in order to be strong enough, Dr. Michael Morbius is forced to like eat his girlfriend, because he's a vampire who sucks blood. It just didn't make sense. I don't know what else to say. It was incredibly stupid. He's like, oh, I have to eat my girlfriend in order to go fight the bad guy. No, you didn't, man. You really didn't. I also don't understand how, like, Matt Smith's character, Milo, he gets the powers after Dr. Michael Morbius, and he knows how to use them better, and he's stronger. How is he stronger? He's had the power for less time. He hasn't learned how to control it. He hasn't learned even what his powers are. How does he know this? And yet he's the strong one? It doesn't make sense. Why does he need to eat his girlfriend? And then we find out at the end of the movie that the girlfriend is alive. So he eats his girlfriend, takes her blood, gets strong enough to beat the bad guy, and then she's now alive? I get that there's the whole thing of like vampires can bite you and then you become a vampire. But like we watched, like he ate her. He didn't do the like cute Bella and Edward thing of like, oh, I'm just going to stick my teeth in your neck. No, he ate her. And now she's just alive. I hate this movie. This movie sucks. But why are we here? We're here for a Catholic perspective on it. And there are two themes within this movie that I thought were actually pretty good to talk about, and something that we haven't talked about here yet on the channel. One, I just thought it was a fascinating, the main dichotomy was how Dr. Michael Morbius saw this problem, this sickness, this illness that they had, and how Milo, Matt Smith's character, saw this problem. Both of them started off with good intentions. Milo's character had a lot of money, and he was funding Dr. Morbius's research into it so that he could, like, they were essentially working together to find a cure. Like, that's great. You got a money guy, you got a doctor guy. That's great initial intentions. But then they're both getting close to death. And that suffering, that pain, living with that suffering for so long, it starts to morph them a little bit. I said morph, not morbid. That's a whole different thing. It starts to morph kind of how they deal with this pain and tragedy. Dr. Morbius like gets these powers, and he's like, "Hey, I think I still might die, but my research will go on, and somebody else will get cured." And Milo, the money guy, he'd been doing the right thing for a while, but then he finds out about the cure. He gets the cure that essentially turns them into, it's not a real cure. It's imperfect. It turns you into a bloodthirsty vampire, but it gives him this power, and he uses it for ill. He's like he now is like, I don't have this disability, this sickness. Now I'm powerful and strong, and I can do whatever I want. It's like we all we all have that. Like we can make these decisions that ultimately change the course of our life, and he was just kind of teetering on, I'm this powerful man with all this money. I can teeter on doing the right thing or doing the bad thing. And for him, he has this power, and he teeters off into the dark side. So one of the things that I was thinking about during the movie and after is just like how I handle pain and suffering. Like I'm not very good at it, and I don't think many people are, right? And within Catholicism, it's like a lot of times people call us the religion, the faith of suffering. Because sometimes it's like a derogatory thing. It's like, oh, you're just, beating your chest and, whipping your back and not eating meat on Fridays and not doing, doing all this self-mortification stuff. But it's like, also like we are a religion where like our primary symbol is a symbol of God suffering on the cross, right? So it's like, how do we deal with suffering, with pain? Like, I don't have the kind of pain and suffering that these two guys do, but then again, I'm not a superhero. Like, these stories, we're supposed to be able to watch them and see how do they connect to our lives, right? So how do I handle the suffering in my life? Sometimes when I'm suffering and things aren't going well, I can choose poorly and I can snap at my kids, or I can yell at somebody, or I can be a jerk or whatever, right? There's other times where I can handle suffering and be like, no, this is for the betterment of other people. I should be doing the right thing. I should be choosing God and goodness and truth, even though I'm not quote unquote feeling it, right? So that was the first theme that I saw. The second was I just kept wondering, because Morbius is like this anti-hero character, right? So like he kills quite a few people within the show. I think the number is like 8. I don't know, I could be wrong. But he kills people. Matt Smith's character is doing it so most of the people that he kills is on the boat at the beginning. He doesn't know how to control his powers. The vampire is kind of in control. He kind of loses control, and there's kind of some self-preservation aspect of it. Like, these guys are shooting him, trying to kill him. They see him as a monster, and the monster just kind of takes over. But what's interesting is talking about intention when it comes to our choice. And I actually see a lot of addiction parallels with Dr. Morbius and Milo's condition after they don't have the sickness, but after they are these vampires. So essentially they have these powers, and they're essentially superheroes or supervillains, but they have to keep drinking blood. And throughout the movie, there's some real people blood, and then there's some synthetic blood, but it's not going to last forever, right? They're going to run out of the synthetic blood. So it's like, it becomes this thing. Do I take human blood, or do I not? So what I found fascinating about it is how they started, well, like especially Dr. Morbius. He was the first person to get these powers. He was not looking to become a superhero or supervillain. He was looking as a normal doctor to cure this disease. That was his original intention. It was not his intention to become this vampire thing, right? So the choice was already made. Like, he couldn't reverse it. He couldn't go back. His only choice at that point was don't drink the blood and die, or keep drinking the blood so they can keep living and keep having these powers, right? But it was really a life or death scenario for him. And then you have, Milo, Matt Smith's character, on the other hand, who gets it and is just like, he doesn't have any qualms at all. He's just like, I'm going to kill, I'm going to take all these people's blood, and I'm going to get stronger and keep living. Kind of that like mentality of like, I deserve this, right? Like, I've suffered enough and I'm rich enough. Whatever his motivations were, I deserve this. And so I think a lot because within Catholicism, it's like, what do we say the 3 things are that are needed for a mortal sin, for a sin to be mortal, right? To cut off our relationship with God. One, it needs to be grave matter. So it needs to be something, a big deal. A good barometer for this is like the 10 Commandments, right? So like, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, don't take the Lord's name in vain, like that sort of stuff, right? So it has to be grave matter. So like when we're talking about this movie, killing people to take their blood is grave matter, right? But then it also you have to know that it's grave matter. You have to know it's wrong. And I think both these characters know that it is wrong to kill people, right? And take their blood. But then you also have to have it has to be grave matter. You have to know that it's wrong. You have to choose to do it anyway. But there's this fascinating thing when it comes to addiction. It's like when somebody gets addicted to, let's just say, alcohol, right? Getting drunk is a sin. They get drunk for the first time. Maybe they're not addicted yet, but they chose that. They chose on that first night to get drunk. And then the next night, maybe they chose it. But it's somewhere along the line, if somebody becomes addicted, when you're addicted to something, it's like you're not really fully choosing it, right? It's not saying it's not a sin, but it's saying like that even the church says that like, if all 3 of those things are not met for a sin, it cannot be mortal anymore, right? So you think of like a shotgun wedding. It's marrying somebody that you don't want to marry. That's a sin for the other person. So like if a woman is having a shotgun wedding, guys forcing her to marry him, it's on him, right? Because it's grave matter for these people, for him to kind of quote unquote take her. He's taking away her choice, and he's fully choosing it. Her, on the other hand, she's not fully choosing this. She knows it's wrong, but she's having to do it anyway because it's this life or death scenario, right? So he is fully in mortal sin, right? But hers, it's like it's not fully immortal sin because she didn't fully get to choose this. It was chosen for her, right? So I started thinking about it with these guys, with Morbius and Milo. They react to it differently, but at least Dr. Morbius is like, do I continue this? Do I just allow myself to die? Do I just do the synthetic blood? Like, he's wrestling with this in his own morality, right? And so, we go back to our example of people who are addicted to whatever, but we're just using the example of alcohol here, right? It's like, what's the correct choice at that point? The correct choice is to, stop drinking alcohol if you're addicted, or for Dr. Morbius, the correct choice is to stop drinking the blood. The difference for Dr. Morbius is he was going to die. If you stop drinking beer, you're not going to die, right? I mean, because of that cause, right? But I saw a lot of like addiction in this, because every time that Dr. Morbius throughout the movie, every time he turns into like this vampire, it's not fully his choice anymore. He made a choice one time back whenever he injected himself, but it was not his intention to become the vampire. So the morality of this was just fascinating. This is why I love the Catholic Church's teaching on morality, because it's not just like black and white, here's what it is. It's like we have to pull all these things together and be like, what is the correct thing to do in this situation? That's why we have things like discernment and forming our conscience, right? So it's important to continue to learn what the church teaches on how we should act in certain situations, because we know basic things of like, you shall not kill, so you shouldn't kill. Like we know that, right? But then there's situations like, well, what if you're in the military? Well, the church allows that. If you're going to war, your intention isn't just to go and kill a bunch of people; it's to protect people back home, right? And there's entire teachings about just war theory and about who's responsible, right? A soldier on the ground has very different responsibility than the general sending them into battle, or even like the chief officer of whoever's the number one person in the military. Everybody has these different levels of responsibility for the choices being made. So it was just kind of a fascinating thought experiment for me. It was like, does every time Morbius drinks blood, is that fully a choice? Because for him, it's life and death. For both of them, it's life and death. At least Morbius is struggling with it, while Milo's character is just fully bought into like the total like depravity of like, I'm just gonna go and kill everybody and take their blood because I deserve this. But at least it shows Dr. Michael Morbius like struggling with it and being like, what is the correct thing to do? So I just thought that was fascinating, because I think obviously none of this is real. People don't become vampires, right? But in watching this movie, it made me there's been a lot of like moral decisions that I've had to make that didn't seem black and white at the time, and I have to go and search the church's teaching. I have to go find wise counsel. I have to pray about it. I have to think about it. I have to discern things, and then and only then can I fully make a decision. A lot of times we try to make things black and white and really easy that are messy and complicated, like people who are addicted to drugs, alcohol, pornography, whatever it is. These things are difficult, and trying to say that they're easy and black and white does not help people within those scenarios. So anyway, those were my the theme moral thoughts about how it connects to our faith. But ultimately, this movie was terrible, and if you haven't watched it yet, don't. I mean, it's pretty bad. Like, unless you want a good laugh, like my wife and I, when we watched it, we laughed quite a bit at moments that they didn't really intend for us to. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I didn't know coming in that Morbius was just the last guy's name. And the big thing that everybody keeps saying was it's Morbin time about this movie, which is hilarious because it's just the guy's last name. So I just want to leave you with this. As we leave today's video and you go and think about all the suffering that we endured together by watching Morbius, I just want you all to know it's Scrolling time. Thank you guys for watching this video today. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please check out the rest of our A Catholic Perspective series about all of our favorite TV shows and movies, where we tackle movies that are better than this one. Also, we have a weekly podcast here on the channel. You can check out our teaching series called Catholic Foundations, about the basic teachings of the faith. We got a ton going on the channel. Hit the subscribe button. Go check out our playlist, and we hope that you enjoy it. Love you. Bye.